Persian Gulf, 14th April, 1988. At 2021 local time, the USS Samuel B struck an Iranian naval mine. The blast lifted the 4,200-ton frigate clear out of the water, tore a 4-meter hole in its hull, and flooded its engineering compartments. 21 sailors were injured, but the ship survived. U.S. Navy analysts later concluded that if a supersonic sea-skimming missile had struck instead, the Roberts would have been destroyed in under 90 seconds. 3 decades earlier, such a weapon did not exist. Soviet engineers faced an impossible challenge: how to neutralize American carrier groups that cost billions of dollars and ruled the seas unchallenged. The answer came from an audacious concept informally dubbed OUTLAW. Missiles too fast to intercept, too low to track, and powerful enough to cripple a 10,000-ton warship in one strike. This is the story of how one engineering vision reshaped naval warfare forever. Tokyo Bay, 2nd September 1945. As representatives of Imperial Japan signed the surrender documents aboard the USS Missouri, the U.S. Navy stood as the most powerful maritime force in human history. The statistics were staggering: 99 aircraft carriers, 349 cruisers and destroyers, and 1,200 smaller combatants dominated every ocean on Earth. In contrast, the Soviet Navy, devastated by 4 years of brutal warfare, possessed fewer than 20 modern surface ships and no operational aircraft carriers. Admiral Chester Nimitz declared that air power afloat will remain the decisive factor in naval warfare. American post-war doctrine reflected this confidence. Carrier strike groups were designed as untouchable spearheads of global power projection, each one capable of delivering more firepower than entire armies. The USS Midway alone carried 75 aircraft. It's more than many nations' entire air forces. Yet, even as victory celebrations continued, Soviet naval planners quietly studied the lessons of the Pacific War. A classified 1946 Soviet Navy report noted, "The American carrier is both their greatest strength and their greatest vulnerability. To defeat such power, one must not attempt to match it. One must render it obsolete." By 1950, the asymmetry had grown even starker. The U.S. operated 15 attack carriers, while the Soviet Union had none. American naval spending exceeded the entire Soviet defense budget. But in the design bureaus of Moscow and Leningrad, a small group of engineers had begun working on equations that would challenge this imbalance. They called their project many names, but one stuck: OUTLAW, Moscow. 16th of July, 1955. The Soviet Navy established the Naval Missile Weapons Directorate in a nondescript building near Red Square. Its mission was deceptively simple: create weapons that could sink American warships without matching them ton for ton. The mathematics were brutal but clear. The United States was building carriers faster than the USSR could construct submarines to sink them. The Directorate's first success came in 1959 with the P-15 Termit. Known to NATO as the SSN-2 Styx, this subsonic cruise missile had an 80-kilometer range, weighed 2,140 kilograms, and carried a 480-kilogram high-explosive warhead. Soviet engineers designed it specifically to attack NATO surface groups using surprise and numbers rather than speed or stealth. The P-15's combat debut shocked naval establishments worldwide. On 21 October 1967, 2 Egyptian Komar-class missile boats fired 4 Termit missiles at the Israeli destroyer Eilat off Port Said. 2 missiles struck home, sinking the Hwandus 700-ton warship in minutes and killing 47 sailors. For the first time in history, small missile boats had destroyed a modern destroyer equipped with radar and defensive systems. Admiral Sergei Gorshkov, commander of the Soviet Navy, later wrote, "The sinking of Eilat proved that the age of the battleship was truly over, but it also showed us that the age of the aircraft carrier might be ending as well." Within months, naval doctrines across the globe were rewritten. The missile had arrived as the new king of naval warfare. Yet Soviet engineers knew the P-15 was merely a beginning. Western navies quickly developed countermeasures, improved radar, electronic warfare systems, and surface-to-air missiles capable of intercepting subsonic targets. A 1968 internal Soviet Navy assessment concluded, "Our present weapons will fail against American Aegis defenses. We require a fundamentally new approach." Dubna, 4th of March 1962. At the Raduga Design Bureau, a team led by engineer Grigory Mosin circulated an internal proposal that would revolutionize naval warfare. The document, classified secret and stamped with red ink, outlined specifications for a missile unlike anything previously attempted: Mach 2 drive speed, sea-skimming flight profile, 300-kilometer range, and a 300-kilogram warhead capable of destroying a cruiser with a single hit. The technical challenges seemed insurmountable. Sustaining supersonic flight at altitudes below 20 meters required revolutionary ramjet technology. The missile would need to withstand surface temperatures exceeding 500 degrees Celsius while maintaining precision guidance through radar clutter and electronic jamming. Material science, propulsion systems, and guidance technology would all need breakthrough advances. Many officials dismissed the proposal as fantasy. The chief of naval construction called it technically impossible with current technology. But Mosin's team had performed detailed calculations. A supersonic sea-skimming missile traveling at 15 meters altitude would be invisible to ship-based radar until 30 seconds before impact, too little. Time for effective countermeasures. The Soviet Navy's 1964 Strategic Guidance Paper endorsed this revolutionary doctrine. Supersonic velocity combined with low-altitude approach represents the optimal solution for defeating enemy task forces. Speed negates defensive reaction time. Altitude negates radar detection. Together they ensure penetration. Funding authorization came in 1965. The project received a military designation 3M80, but engineers continued using their informal code name, OUTLAW, for a weapon designed to operate outside conventional naval warfare rules. Western intelligence agencies remained unaware of the program for nearly a decade. By 1970, prototype testing had begun at the Kapustin Yar facility. Early trials achieved Mach 2.2 at 20-meter altitude, speeds that Western analysts still considered physically impossible for sea-skimming flight. The outlaw concept was becoming reality. Kapustin Yar Missile Range, 12th of February 1972. The first successful test firing of the 3M80 prototype sent shockwaves through the international intelligence community. NATO observers, monitoring from distant positions, recorded radar signatures unlike anything in their databases. A target moving at Mach 2.3 while maintaining consistent altitude just 15 meters above simulated wave tops. The breakthrough lay in Raduga's revolutionary propulsion system. A solid fuel booster accelerated the missile to Mach 1.8 within 4 seconds. Then the kerosene-fueled ramjet ignited, sustaining speeds between Mach 2.2 and 2.5 for the remainder of flight. Unlike traditional missiles that followed ballistic arcs, the 3M80 maintained controlled flight throughout its trajectory. Soviet metallurgists had solved the heat problem using advanced titanium alloys developed for MiG-25 interceptors. The missile's nose cone and leading edges could withstand 500-degree temperatures without structural failure. More importantly, the guidance system remained functional despite extreme thermal stress, an achievement Western engineers had deemed impossible. Flight testing revealed extraordinary performance characteristics. At maximum range of 250 kilometers, the missile reached its target in approximately 6 minutes. During terminal approach, it descended to 7 meters altitude, below the radar horizon of most surface ships until 25 seconds before impact. Even then, the missile's small radar cross-section and high speed made interception extremely difficult. A captured CIA assessment from 1973 noted, "Soviet advances in supersonic sea-skimming technology exceed our projections by 5 to 7 years. Current NATO defensive systems cannot reliably engage targets moving above Mach 2.0 at such low altitudes." The 3M80's kinetic energy alone, independent of its 300-kilogram warhead, equaled the impact of a 100 kilogram bomb traveling at conventional aircraft speeds. When combined with the high explosive payload, a single hit could break the back of a destroyer or cripple a cruiser's propulsion and electrical systems. Khimki, 22 March 1975, the Raduga factory complex received authorization for full-scale production of what would become known as the Mosquet, Russian for mosquito. The name reflected Soviet tactical doctrine, swarms of small, fast weapons overwhelming large, expensive targets through speed and numbers rather than individual destructive power. Production specifications revealed the weapon's devastating capabilities. Each 3M80 measured 9.7 meters in length, weighed 4,500 kilograms at launch, and cost approximately 800,000 rubles, equivalent to $2.5 million in contemporary currency. The warhead options included conventional, high explosive or a 200 kiloton nuclear payload. For use against carrier battle groups, initial production proceeded slowly as engineers refined manufacturing processes. Quality control demanded extraordinary precision. Ramjet engines required tolerances measured in hundredths of millimeters. The guidance computer, containing over 15,000 components, underwent individual testing before installation. By 1977, Raduga produced 8 missiles monthly. By 1980, output reached 15 units per month. The missile's guidance system represented a quantum leap in naval warfare technology. The KTR-200 radar seeker could acquire and track targets at ranges exceeding 30 kilometers while rejecting electronic countermeasures and sea clutter. During terminal approach, an inertial backup system ensured accuracy even under intense jamming. NATO naval planners watched these developments with growing alarm. A 1978 Joint Intelligence Committee assessment warned a single Sovremeny destroyer armed with 8 Mosquet missiles poses a greater threat to carrier operations than an entire squadron of conventional attack aircraft. The cost exchange ratio favored the Soviets dramatically. A Nimitz-class carrier cost $4.5 billion and carried 5,000 personnel. 8 Mosquet missiles cost $20 million total and required only 48 crew members to operate from a destroyer. Soviet naval doctrine called this revolutionary asymmetry, using advanced technology to negate American numerical and economic advantages. Production accelerated throughout the early 1980s as the Cold War intensified. Morristown, New Jersey, 17th of June, 1978. Lockheed engineers received an urgent contract modification that would reshape American naval defense systems. Intelligence reports describing Soviet supersonic sea-skimming missiles had triggered a crash program to upgrade the Aegis combat system. The challenge was unprecedented, detecting and engaging targets moving at Mach 2.5 while flying barely above wave tops. The technical hurdles seemed overwhelming. Traditional naval radar operated on the principle that targets would fly at medium to high altitudes, providing detection ranges of 200-300 kilometers. The Mosquet's sea-skimming profile reduced this to approximately 40 kilometers, giving defending ships less than 60 seconds to detect, track, engage, and destroy incoming missiles. Aegis Baseline 4 incorporated revolutionary signal processing algorithms designed specifically for low-altitude threats. The SPY-1A radar increased pulse repetition frequency and refined clutter rejection capabilities. Most importantly, reaction time decreased from several minutes to under 30 seconds through automated fire control systems that could engage targets without human intervention. Yet even these advances provided only marginal improvements against Mosquet salvos. Computer simulations conducted at the Naval War College demonstrated that 12 missiles launched simultaneously from 2 Soviet destroyers could overwhelm a carrier group's defensive umbrella. The mathematics were stark. Even with 70% individual intercept probability, at least 3 missiles would penetrate defensive screens. Admiral James Watkins testified before Congress in 1979, "We face a fundamental shift in naval warfare. For 3 decades, we assumed our ships were sanctuaries, protected by distance and defensive systems. That assumption no longer holds against weapons traveling faster than our ability to respond." The Pentagon solution required unprecedented investment. Between 1978 and 1985, defensive system upgrades consumed over $30 billion. This included Aegis radar improvements, development of the Standard Missile 2 Block III, integration of close-in weapon systems, and installation of electronic warfare suites on every major combatant. The cost irony was unavoidable. Defending against $20 million worth of Soviet missiles required defensive investments exceeding $2 billion per carrier group. South Atlantic, 4 May 1982, HMS Sheffield, a Type 42 destroyer equipped with modern air defense systems, was struck by a single Argentine AN-39 Exocet missile. The subsonic weapon, traveling at only Mach 0.93, penetrated the ship's defenses, killed 20 sailors, and caused damage so severe that Sheffield sank 6 days later while under tow. The implications terrified Western naval commanders. If a 1970s-era subsonic missile could destroy a modern destroyer, what would a Mach 2.5 musket do to a carrier? British Rear Admiral John Forster later wrote, "Sheffield's loss demonstrated that the missile age had truly arrived. No ship afloat could consider itself safe from determined attack. The Exocet that sank Sheffield weighed 670 kilograms and carried a 165-kilogram warhead. The musket weighed 4,500 kilograms, carried a 300-kilogram warhead, and traveled nearly 3 times faster. The kinetic energy difference was devastating. A musket impact would deliver approximately 12 times more destructive force than the OUTLAW weapon that sank Sheffield at Royal. Navy damage assessments revealed the vulnerability of modern warships to missile attack. Sheffield's aluminum superstructure had provided minimal protection against conventional explosives. The ship's electrical systems failed immediately, preventing damage control efforts. Fire spread rapidly through areas designed for peacetime operations, not combat damage. American analysts extrapolated these lessons to carrier vulnerability. A Nimitz-class carrier, despite its armored flight deck and compartmentalized design, remained vulnerable to weapons capable of penetrating below the waterline. A musket's 300-kilogram warhead could breach hull plating, flood engineering spaces, and disable propulsion systems. The Falklands conflict accelerated American defensive programs by at least 2 years. Congress appropriated emergency funding for close-in weapon systems installation on all major combatants. The Navy's FY 1983 budget included 250% increases for electronic warfare equipment and missile defense research, yet even these measures provided limited confidence. As one Pentagon assessment noted, "We are attempting to solve a Mach 2.5 problem with Mach 1.5 technology." Beijing, 3 November 1984. Chinese naval representatives signed a contract acquiring musket missile technology for installation aboard Type 052 destroyers and Hubei-class fast attack craft. The transaction marked a fundamental shift in global naval balance. Supersonic anti-ship missiles were no longer exclusive to the Soviet Union. The export variant, designated 3M80E, retained most combat capabilities of the domestic version. Range decreased slightly to 120 kilometers, but speed and terminal guidance remained unchanged. China received 48 missiles plus manufacturing licenses for domestic production. Within 5 years, Chinese shipyards had produced over 100 additional units. India followed with an even more ambitious program. The joint Indo-Russian BrahMos project, based on musket technology, achieved Mach 3.0 speeds and 300-kilometer range. Unlike earlier missiles limited to ship-launched variants, BrahMos could be fired from aircraft, submarines, and mobile ground launchers. By 1990, more than 15 nations operated supersonic anti-ship missiles based on Soviet technology. Algeria, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Syria acquired export versions through various agreements. Each transfer shifted regional naval balances dramatically. Nations that could never afford large surface fleets suddenly possessed weapons capable of threatening major powers. Warships, the proliferation created strategic nightmares for Western naval planners. During the 1991 Gulf War, U.S. Navy commanders positioned carrier battle groups beyond silkworm missile range, acknowledging that even outdated Chinese variants posed unacceptable risks to multi-billion-dollar ships. Arms control, proved impossible once the technology spread. Unlike nuclear weapons requiring rare materials and complex facilities, anti-ship missiles could be manufactured in conventional aerospace plants. The knowledge base continued expanding as engineers migrated between programs and nations reverse-engineered captured systems. A 1992 CIA assessment concluded, supersonic anti-ship missile technology has fundamentally altered global naval warfare. Nations lacking significant surface fleets can now pose credible threats to major naval powers. The era of unchallenged carrier group supremacy has ended. The outlaw concept had achieved its ultimate goal, not merely challenging American naval dominance, but democratizing the tools of naval warfare itself. Persian Gulf, 14th of April, 1988. When USS Samuel B struck an Iranian mine, the resulting damage provided American naval architects with sobering insights into modern warship vulnerability. The explosion, equivalent to approximately 300 kilograms of TNT, lifted the 4,200-ton frigate completely out of the water and cracked its aluminum superstructure in multiple locations post-incident. Analysis revealed catastrophic implications for missile warfare. The mine's explosive force was roughly equivalent to a musket's warhead, but delivered from below rather than above the waterline. A musket impact would have struck the ship's superstructure at Mach 2.5, concentrating kinetic and explosive energy in a much smaller area with devastating effect. Naval architects calculated that a musket strike would have penetrated Robert's hull plating, destroyed its engineering plant, and caused the ship to sink within 3 minutes. The frigate's crew would have had insufficient time for effective damage control or evacuation procedures. The incident accelerated American defensive improvements. The Navy's close-in weapons system received emergency upgrades, improving engagement speeds and tracking capabilities. Aegis radar processing algorithms were modified to detect sea-skimming targets more effectively. Electronic warfare suites were enhanced to counter missile guidance systems, yet fundamental vulnerabilities remained. Modern warships, designed for global deployment and extended operations, could not be armored like World War II battleships without sacrificing speed, range, and mission capability. The aluminum and steel construction that enabled rapid construction and reduced maintenance provided minimal protection against modern anti-ship missiles. A classified Naval Sea Systems Command report noted, contemporary surface combatants were designed assuming air superiority and defensive umbrella protection. Against weapons like musket, these assumptions no longer hold. Ship survivability requires fundamental architectural reconsideration. The Persian Gulf incident demonstrated that American naval supremacy faced challenges beyond simple defensive improvements. The age of missile warfare had arrived, and existing platforms remained vulnerable regardless of technological upgrades. Newport, Rhode Island, 21 September 1990, Naval War. College analysts completed the most comprehensive assessment of carrier group vulnerability conducted during the Cold War. Operation Global War 90 simulated a NATO Warsaw Pact conflict using the most sophisticated computer models available. To American military planners, the results were shocking. In 13 of 15 simulation runs, Soviet forces armed with musket missiles disabled at least 2 American aircraft carriers within the first 48 hours of hostilities. In the most devastating scenario, coordinated attacks by 4 Sovremeni destroyers resulted in 3 carrier losses and crippling damage to 2 additional capital ships. The simulation's key finding involved defensive saturation. Even with perfect radar detection and maximum defensive system performance, carrier battle groups could not reliably intercept more than 8 simultaneous supersonic missiles. Soviet doctrine called for salvos of 12 to 16 muskets launched from multiple platforms, ensuring that several weapons would penetrate defensive screens. Captain William Thompson, the simulation director, later testified before Congress. We discovered that our defensive assumptions were fundamentally flawed. We had designed systems capable of defeating individual missiles or small groups. Soviet planners designed attacks specifically to overwhelm those systems through coordinated mass. The economic implications were staggering. Each simulated carrier loss represented $4.5 billion in construction costs, plus 5,000 highly trained personnel. The attacking Soviet destroyers cost approximately $800 million each and carried crews of 350. The exchange ratio favored the attacker by more than 5.1 in both economic and human terms. Perhaps most disturbing, the simulations assumed optimal American performance, perfect intelligence, maximum defensive readiness, and ideal weather conditions. Real combat would likely produce even worse outcomes due to fog of war, equipment failures, and human factors. The study's classified conclusions recommended fundamental changes to American naval strategy, increased submarine emphasis, distributed operations, and reduced reliance on large surface platforms. Implementation of these recommendations would require abandoning decades of carrier-centric doctrine. Thiruvananthapuram, India, 12th of June, 1995. The first Indo-Russian BrahMos supersonic cruise missile rolled off production lines at BrahMos Aerospace Limited. This weapon represented the maturation of concepts first explored in the Soviet OUTLAW program 3 decades earlier. Mach 3.0 speed, 300-kilometer range, and guidance systems capable of defeating the most advanced defensive networks. BrahMos incorporated lessons learned from 30 years of anti-ship missile development. Its ramjet propulsion system achieved unprecedented efficiency, enabling sustained supersonic flight across the weapon's entire range envelope. Advanced guidance algorithms could distinguish between multiple targets in dense, electronic warfare environments while maintaining accuracy. Within 3 meters of the designated impact point, the missile's export success demonstrated the global demand for carrier-killing capabilities. Malaysia, Vietnam, and the Philippines acquired BrahMos systems despite American diplomatic pressure. Each sale shifted regional naval balances dramatically. Nations with minimal surface fleets suddenly possessed weapons capable of threatening major powers' most expensive platforms, Russian. Engineers simultaneously developed the 3M55 Onyx SSN-26, achieving even higher performance standards. This weapon reached Mach 3.5 during terminal approach while maintaining 7-meter altitude. Its 300-kilogram warhead could penetrate 30 centimeters of steel armor, sufficient to destroy any surface combatant's vital systems with a single hit. By 2000, more than 30 nations operated supersonic anti-ship missiles derived from Soviet OUTLAW concepts. The technology had become democratized, available to any nation willing to pay market prices. A single coastal battery armed with 4 missiles could deny sea lanes to billion-dollar task forces. American naval planners faced an uncomfortable reality. The weapons designed to counter Soviet naval power had proliferated globally. The same missiles that once threatened U.S. forces during the Cold War now equipped potential adversaries worldwide. The genie could not be returned to its bottle. The OUTLAW concept had achieved its creators' wildest dreams, reshaping naval warfare permanently and proving that technological innovation could overcome any numerical disadvantage. Washington, D.C., 2020. Pentagon. Analysts conducting comprehensive assessments of post-Cold War naval capabilities reached sobering conclusions about the balance between offensive and defensive systems. A single Ford-class aircraft carrier cost $13.2 billion and carried 4,500 personnel. By contrast, a coordinated attack using 12 modern anti-ship missiles cost approximately $36 million and required fewer than 50 operators. The mathematics remained as stark as they had been. During the height of the Cold War, defensive improvements increased carrier survivability marginally while consuming billions in additional investment. The Aegis Baseline 9 upgrade, designed specifically to counter supersonic threats, cost $2.8 billion per ship. Even these enhanced systems provided only 40–50% interception probability against coordinated missile salvos. Modern anti-ship missiles had evolved beyond their Soviet origins while retaining core OUTLAW principles. The Chinese DF-21D carrier killer combined supersonic speed with ballistic trajectory, rendering traditional naval air defenses ineffective. Russian Zircon missiles achieved Mach 9 speeds, reducing reaction time to mere seconds even at maximum detection range. Naval architects attempted to address vulnerability through design modifications. The Zumwalt-class destroyer incorporated stealth characteristics and advanced defensive systems. But construction costs exceeded $4.4 billion per ship, making the vessel itself a strategic target too expensive to risk in combat. The proliferation challenge intensified throughout the 2000s. Iran developed indigenous anti-ship missiles based on Chinese designs. North Korea acquired Soviet-era technology through various channels. Even non-state actors gained access to sophisticated guidance systems through black market networks. A 2010 Office of Naval Intelligence Assessment concluded, the fundamental asymmetry identified during the Cold War has intensified rather than diminished. Small nations and non-state actors possess weapons capable of disabling platforms that require decades and billions of dollars to develop. The outlaw concept had become the dominant paradigm in naval warfare, speed, surprise, and cost-effectiveness, trumping traditional measures of naval power. Central Naval Museum, St. Petersburg, 12th of December 2021. A glass display case contains components from a 3M-80 Musket missile. The ramjet engine that enabled Mach 2.5 speeds, guidance electronics that could penetrate electronic warfare, and the 300-kilogram warhead capable of destroying a cruiser. The placard reads simply, Anti-Ship Missile System 3M-80, service period 1983-2016. 60 years after Grigory Mosin first proposed his outlaw concept, its influence permeates naval warfare globally. More than 40 nations operate supersonic anti-ship missiles derived from Soviet designs. The principles established at Raduga Design Bureau, speed over stealth, kinetic energy over explosive power, cost-effectiveness over platform sophistication, define modern naval weapons development. The strategic transformation is complete. No surface combatant, regardless of size or defensive capability, can guarantee survival against determined missile attack. The era of naval supremacy through platform dominance has ended, replaced by an age where technological innovation and tactical surprise determine outcomes. Recent conflicts validate these principles repeatedly. During the 2006 Lebanon War, Hezbollah forces damaged an Israeli corvette using a Chinese-made anti-ship missile. In 2016, Houthi rebels struck a UAE logistics vessel with an Iranian-supplied weapon. Each incident demonstrated that even non-state actors can challenge. Conventional naval forces using missile technology descended from Soviet innovations. The economic implications remain as relevant today as they were during the Cold War. Building and maintaining carrier battle groups requires resources available only to major powers. Countering them requires only sophisticated missiles available on international markets. This asymmetry ensures that sea control will never again be the exclusive province of dominant naval powers. A Soviet Navy assessment from 1962 predicted the ship is no longer a fortress. It is a target, and every target has a solution. The outlaw concept provided that solution, proving that engineering brilliance and strategic vision could reshape the global balance of power. In the end, one engineer's impossible dream became the nightmare of naval supremacy. By the dawn of the 21st century, the outlaw concept had become more than a Soviet military program. It had transformed into a global paradigm for naval warfare, one whose ramifications would resonate far beyond the cold, concrete corridors of Moscow's design bureaus. Grigory Mosin's vision, conceived in the austere offices of the Raduga Design Bureau nearly 6 decades earlier, had begun as a radical answer to an asymmetry in global power. The United States, with its vast, technologically sophisticated carrier fleets, had dominated the seas with confidence born of overwhelming material advantage. The Soviet Union, recovering from the catastrophic losses of the Second World War, could not hope to meet this force on conventional terms. Yet Mosin and his team approached the problem with audacity. They did not attempt to compete in volume or size. Instead, they redefined the rules of engagement: speed over mass, precision over numbers, cost efficiency over sheer platform durability. The OUTLAW concept, an anti-ship missile supersonic in speed, low skimming in altitude, devastating in effect, had broken the centuries-old assumption that naval supremacy could be achieved through the accumulation of steel and manpower alone. By the 1980s, this principle had been proven repeatedly in simulations, tests, and real-world incidents. And while the world may have remembered the dramatic explosion aboard USS Samuel B. Roberts in 1988 as a narrowly avoided catastrophe, the underlying lesson was sobering. In the missile age, even a $4.5 billion carrier could be vulnerable to a coordinated salvo costing mere millions. The implications of OUTLAW were both immediate and enduring. In the closing decades of the Cold War, NATO naval planners faced a paradox. The very ships designed to project global power were, under new technological paradigms, extremely vulnerable. Defense expenditures skyrocketed. Yet every investment in radar upgrades, electronic warfare suites, and automated missile interceptors provided only partial mitigation against a threat that had evolved far faster than defensive doctrine. The American response, massive investment in the Aegis combat system, close-in weapon systems, and advanced signal processing, was, in essence, a reactive adaptation. For all its sophistication, it was still measured against a framework designed for a world in which targets could be tracked at hundreds of kilometers and destroyed with conventional air power. The musket and its successors had rewritten the calculus. Reaction time was measured in seconds, not minutes. Interception probabilities were uncertain, not guaranteed. As the Soviet Union dissolved, OUTLAW's principles did not fade with it. On the contrary, they were exported, repurposed, and improved. China's acquisition of musket technology in the mid-1980s marked a pivotal moment in global naval strategy. For the first time, supersonic anti-ship capability was no longer confined to the superpower arena. Beijing adapted the missiles for its own strategic context, incorporating them into fast attack craft and modern destroyers. Achieving a new asymmetry, a regional navy could now threaten platforms far beyond its traditional reach. India, observing these developments, initiated a joint program with Russian engineers that resulted in the BrahMos missile, a Mach 3.0 supersonic weapon capable of launching from multiple platforms, from warships to land vehicles to aircraft. This proliferation demonstrated an essential truth. OUTLAW was not merely a weapon. It was a doctrine, one that could be adopted and adapted by any nation willing to invest in its principles. The global consequences of this dissemination were profound. The Persian Gulf, the South China Sea, and the waters of Southeast Asia became arenas in which the calculus of naval power shifted dramatically. Nations with limited budgets could now threaten multi-billion-dollar warships. The deterrence value of carrier groups, once absolute, became conditional. Strategic planners learned to think not in terms of invulnerable platforms, but in terms of distributed, survivable networks, submarine-launched missiles, coastal defense systems, and layered anti-ship networks. Sea control, once the exclusive domain of superpowers, became a contested resource, negotiable and precarious, dependent less on the number of ships and more on the speed, accuracy, and deployment of missile systems. The evolution of OUTLAW's progeny continued through the first decades of the 21st century. Russian engineers developed the 3M55 Onyx and later the Zircon, achieving Mach 8 to 9 speeds and terminal precision that reduced reaction time to mere seconds. Chinese engineers expanded their anti-ship missile programs, culminating in the DF-21D, the so-called carrier killer, capable of targeting moving vessels across hundreds of kilometers with unprecedented accuracy. Even regional powers began fielding capable missiles. Iran, North Korea, and Pakistan adapted technology through direct acquisition or reverse engineering, while non-state actors gained access to lower-range but highly effective variants via black market networks. In every case, the guiding principles were clear: velocity, surprise, precision, and cost-effectiveness outweighed traditional concepts of armor, crew size, or even firepower, military analysts quickly realized that the consequences of OUTLAW were not limited to conventional engagements. The proliferation of supersonic and hypersonic anti-ship missiles introduced an era in which asymmetric warfare could threaten even the most technologically advanced navies. Conflicts in the Middle East, South Asia, and North Africa repeatedly validated this principle. Small groups or state actors using relatively inexpensive missile systems could inflict damage that might otherwise have required massive combined arms operations. A single missile or a coordinated salvo could achieve strategic results far beyond its cost, a reality that reshaped defense procurement, naval architecture, and operational doctrine across the globe. At the same time, the technology spurred an arms race of countermeasures. Radar systems became faster and more sophisticated. Automated targeting computers were upgraded, electronic warfare capabilities expanded, and kinetic point defense systems like the Phalanx and RAM were widely deployed. Yet, even with these improvements, the underlying asymmetry remained. Missile velocities continued to outpace defensive reaction times. Stealthy, low-altitude approaches could exploit natural and electronic clutter. And as new missiles entered service, such as hypersonic variants, and those capable of maneuvering unpredictably in terminal approach, the balance between offense and defense remained unsettled. In practical terms, OUTLAW's fundamental vision, speed and surprise as equalizers, remained intact. The strategic, political, and economic implications were equally significant. The cost-exchange ratio, long favorable to the U.S. in traditional naval engagements, shifted dramatically. A Nimitz-class carrier cost billions and required thousands of personnel. A small fleet of missile-equipped destroyers or fast attack craft could achieve disproportionate deterrence. Smaller nations suddenly gained strategic leverage, able to threaten conventional naval superpowers with weapons that were technologically advanced yet accessible. Diplomacy, once dominated by the projection of physical force, became increasingly influenced by the spread of missile technology, complicating alliances, balance of power calculations, and regional deterrent strategies. By 2021, the OUTLAW legacy was more visible than ever. Exhibits in the Central Naval Museum in St. Petersburg displayed Mosquet missile components as both historical artifacts and symbols of enduring military influence. The ramjet engines, guidance electronics, and 300-kilogram warheads represented decades of experimentation, risk-taking, and visionary engineering. The plaques accompanying them highlighted a critical lesson. A single engineer's audacious concept could alter the global strategic landscape. Technology, once tested in secrecy, had proven capable of transcending borders, ideologies, and eras. It had democratized the tools of naval power, making them accessible to any state or organization willing to adopt its principles. OUTLAW's influence extended beyond naval warfare. Its underlying philosophy, leveraging technological innovation to offset numerical inferiority, was adopted across domains. Land-based missile systems, precision-guided munitions, electronic warfare networks, and even cyber operations echoed the same logic. Military planners worldwide recognized that dominance no longer relied solely on mass, armor, or firepower. Instead, success required ingenuity, speed, and the ability to exploit the vulnerabilities of an opponent who might otherwise appear invulnerable. The strategic mindset Mosin championed of thinking outside conventional paradigms and leveraging cutting-edge technology became a foundational principle in modern military thought. Even as technology advanced, OUTLAW's story carried a cautionary dimension. Nations that possessed missile superiority had to balance strategic opportunity with ethical and operational constraints. The destructive potential of modern anti-ship missiles demanded careful command, coordination, and doctrine to avoid escalation. Naval planners recognized that the very weapons that could serve as effective deterrents could, in conflict, cause catastrophic loss of life and material. The story of the Mosquet and its successors was thus both a testament to human ingenuity and a sobering reminder of the responsibilities accompanying technological power. Looking back across decades, it becomes clear that Outlaw's ultimate achievement was not merely the creation of a weapon, but the transformation of naval warfare itself. Grigory Mosin's original vision to render overwhelming numerical and technological superiority irrelevant through speed, surprise, and precise destructive power was fully realized. A small, agile, and cost-effective weapon could now challenge the mightiest fleets, reshaping the calculations of both offense and defense. This principle underpinned the development of BrahMos, Zircon, DF-21D, and countless other systems that continue to influence naval strategy today. The symbolic resonance of Outlaw endures in strategic thinking. Supremacy is no longer guaranteed by size, wealth, or quantity alone. A single, well-engineered solution, properly applied, can shift the balance of power. The paradigm it introduced, where technological ingenuity can redefine operational realities, remains a guiding principle not only in naval circles, but across the broader military and geopolitical spectrum. As the 21st century progresses, the fundamental lessons of Outlaw remain unchanged. The age of unchallenged naval supremacy is over. Small, fast, and precise systems can challenge giants, and the imagination of a few visionary engineers can reshape the destinies of nations. While ships, aircraft, and sailors continue to evolve, the Outlaw concept, its speed, its kinetic logic, and its audacity, remains a central reference point for strategists, engineers, and historians alike. From the silent launch rails of Capistan Yar to the high seas of the Persian Gulf, from the workshops of Raduga to the missile bays of BrahMos Aerospace, the story of Outlaw is a story of human ingenuity overcoming material asymmetry, of the audacity to challenge established doctrine, and of a single idea's capacity to reshape the global balance of power. In the final analysis, Outlaw is more than history. It is a lens through which we understand the evolving nature of warfare, the enduring power of technological innovation, and the precariousness of dominance in a world where imagination, speed, and precision can outmatch raw strength. Grigory Mosin's dream, once dismissed as impossible, became a reality that transformed naval warfare forever. And in that transformation lies the ultimate legacy of Outlaw, a reminder that no fortress is impregnable, no strategy immutable, and no era of supremacy permanent. The seas, once the uncontested domain of empires, are now defined by the weapons that can strike fastest, hit hardest, and demand respect not through size but through ingenuity. And in this new age, the Outlaw concept stands as a testament to the enduring truth. In warfare, as in history, bold ideas have consequences far beyond the minds that conceive them. What is your perspective on this part of history? Share your thoughts in the comments, because every memory and reflection helps keep the past alive.